Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Fans Talk Pro Wrestling Podcast. As always, I am your host with the Holla French Toast, Freddie Carlson, and I am joined today by two very fantastic individuals. First of all, the always pleasant color commentator from the other side of the camera, Angelo Belli. Say hi to the people, Angelo.
Hello, hello. Welcome to this very special episode.
And today we are joined by a good friend. His name is Austin. He is a huge wrestling fan, just like the both of us, and he is going to be joining us today for this podcast episode. Austin, say hello.
What's up, y'all?
All right. So we asked Austin to join us because we have an interesting topic to talk about today, and we think he can provide a lot of insight in addition to ours. So what we're going to talk about today is going to talk about the lack of new stars being produced in WWE, as well as the comparison of modern stars to stars from the past, and how we view that comparison to be either good or bad. Spoiler alert, I don't like it. But we'll get to that. So right off the bat, I'm going to throw a question to the both of y'all. Austin, since you're our guest, I'll let you go first. Is there anything that you can say about WWE in 2020 and whether they are successful or not successful in creating new stars? Anything that you can pinpoint right off the bat?
So right off the bat, I would say that I don't know what the right formula is for creating the right the brand new John Cena face that runs the place, but nothing that they've been trying as of recently has been working, and they've got the top talent to do it. They've got AJ Styles, they've got Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, they've got all these marquee names, they've got Brock Lesnar, they've got whoever they want, and they haven't been really successful in creating that next John Cena name. And when it comes to talking about like these stars, about like who we're exactly talking about, in my mind, who it is like you've got your names that people who aren't fans of pro wrestling can just name, and like you can name them and they know who you're talking about. So you've got John Cena, you've got Ric Flair, you've got Hulk Hogan, The Rock, Stone Cold, Steve Austin. Those are just a few. There might be a couple more, but I mean, those are the mainstream people that are going to get people who might not be watching wrestling. They'll recognize the name and they'll associate. And so those are kind of what we're talking about. And in terms of building that next star that's going to be, people in the mainstream world are going to know about, there's no one right now that they have that's really doing that other than like Randy Orton they've had for a while, and I guess he's like borderline only because of the RKO vines from 2013, 2014. And they've started too with Roman Reigns, and I'll get into that in a little bit later, I guess. But yeah, I'll turn it over to Angelo.
Yeah, Angelo, what do you got, man?
I mean, yeah, they do have a very tough time creating new people. I feel like what they're trying to do is they're trying to put new faces into I'm trying to find better terms for it, but into already used gimmicks. Like I remember back in 2014, 2015, they tried to do the remake of the Mega Powers with Damian Sandow and Curtis Axel. As funny as it was,
God, that was awful.
Just get their asses beat.
That was awful.
It was very awful.
I'm gonna say that right now. I love both of those guys, and I think they're very talented wrestlers. But that Sandow came off of that great face turn at WrestleMania, turning on The Miz. They built it for months, and that's what you go with? I mean, I could have listed 1,000 things that I would have done before making him dress up like Macho Man.
Macho Man now.
Oh,
well, even Axel and Sandow just doing their own thing as themselves would have been 100 times better than the Mega Power.
Absolutely.
Oh, without a doubt.
He came out and did that promo in the black T-shirt and the jeans as Sandow, and everyone was like hyped for what was going to come next. He was like everyone's pick to do great things, and then that happened. And a year later, he was released, and you can't really say much else about that.
Yeah, that's WWE just kind of taking someone that they know that clearly has a lot of talent and a genuine connection with the audience and just saying, we don't know what to do with you because you're not like what we're used to. And unfortunately, they've only had a handful of times in the past where they've actually capitalized on that opportunity. And honestly, I can only think of Daniel Bryan when that comes to mind. And we know how hard they tried to not make that happen. I mean, if you think back to the playing out of that whole 8-month storyline, yeah, great culmination, WrestleMania 30. I mean, by far one of my absolute favorite moments as a fan ever, watching on a live pay-per-view. But he wasn't supposed to be there. We all know that. He was literally supposed to wrestle Sheamus for the United States Championship on that show. And yet he ends up in the two of the biggest matches of the year against three bona fide Hall of Fame superstars and winning both of them and the world title and the whole celebration. And to me, that was a just due. And it was like WWE saying, maybe we can, to me, like even at the time, I was like, hey, this is a chance for a new guy to be on the top for years to come. And now I know you can't book around injuries. We talked about it with our fantasy booking last week, Angelo. But you can't book around injuries, but you can book around stupidity. And the stupidity of not seeing how popular Brian was at first was I just cannot understand it. And then two, and then kind of going back to what we were saying before about having the pieces there. Personally, for me, I think that they do have a lot of pieces that can be beneficial. I mean, Austin, I know you're a huge Drew McIntyre fan, and they're doing a lot of good things with Drew right now. And I'm saying that with both fingers crossed that they don't mess this up, because he's a bona fide superstar for the future. And seeing as though you're such a big fan, I thought I could ask you, do you see them giving him the same type of treatment that a John Cena or a Brock Lesnar or a Roman Reigns has gotten, in the next 5-10 years while he's still in his prime?
Well, I do see him in terms of like the wrestling world. I do see him being, this is not his one and done world title run. I think that when this is over, there'll be a second one, possibly a third or a fourth down the line. It just depends on how many years he feels he has left on his career. But it's interesting because it's like we're talking about who's going to be built to be the next big face of the company that people are going to put on their wrestling Mount Rushmores from your other guys' podcast like a while back. Mm-hmm. And what is Drew McIntyre not doing right now, or creative not having him do right now, that's not letting him get to those heights? Because like he's been putting on really good matches during the pandemic era. He's been doing great promos. He's been really excelling at being a WWE champion. But I still don't feel like when this reign is said and done, whether he has more reigns or not, he's going to be remembered as an all-time great in the sport of pro wrestling. Like, because anyone can have one WWE championship run. The Miz, Jinder Mahal, and they're all good, really good wrestlers. But it's like, what does Drew need to do, or what does someone need to tell Drew to do to really just get from where he is now even higher into the stratosphere? And he can do it. We need to know what he needs to do.
Oh yeah. I mean, and I like the concept of him working with Randy right now. I mean, Austin, you and I, after Angelo and I's first episode was released on YouTube, you had said to me that you were kind of surprised at my ranking of Randy Orton and how low he was on my top 50. And I actually, especially because that was done really early into the return of this Legend Killer gimmick, and after this summer, and seeing how good of a promo he cuts, even at this stage of his career, and how good the storytelling has been fantastic, I really do want to reevaluate to the point where I can put him in the top 10. And I think Drew working with a guy like that for an extended basis like he is really going to benefit him in the long run. Because Randy has, Randy has his reputation for he can be lazy and stuff, but when he wants to work, he can work. And I think that if he can, and I don't know what goes on behind the scenes, obviously, we don't know until very much later in the process. I think that this could be beneficial to Drew because he can give him the character nuances that Drew might be missing to really make that big step. John Cena wasn't a major star overnight. He had that really rough 2002, 2003. It wasn't until 2004 when he was starting to connect with the crowd and finally getting over with the Thugonomics gimmick. And, he became one of the all-time greats to the point where now he's got this Hollywood career that's budding, and he's going to very well be one of WWE's biggest draws whenever he's there. So I think that there's a lot of steps that can still be taken for a guy like Drew and many others, like we've said, to really get to that level going forward.
There are but definitely a bunch of other names in WWE right now who are very, who have the potential to be up and be that next face, that next Mount Rushmore face of the company, and they're just not there yet. And I don't know what they need to do. Something needs to happen for them to get there. But yeah, no, Randy Orton, I will not stop singing his praises. I'm not always the most firm. Like, I love Randy Orton, but like I have my favorites just personally, and he's one of my favorite. He's my goat. Okay, like he's my greatest of all time. There's no doubt about that. Just because Drew and John Morrison, I like them more, it doesn't mean that Randy Orton isn't my goat. Mm-hmm. And Randy Orton is the goat because he pays attention to the little things. Every little detail of the match, you can see him selling it, or you can see him paying attention to it and working it into the storyline going forward. And him and one other person that I know that do that really well is Johnny Gargano. And I think Johnny Gargano is definitely going to have some potential to be one of those faces if they do it right.
Oh, I've said this to Angelo many a time. I'm so afraid for what happens if he and Adam Cole and Tommaso Ciampa, if they ever leave NXT and come to the main roster, so to speak.
Oh yeah.
I'm so afraid for what's going to happen to them because I hate to just say, it's going to be the same thing that happened with everybody before them, but the track record isn't great. There's a very select few guys who have come up from NXT in this incarnation, I'm going to add, and seen any type of success. And I don't count Seth Rollins because, let's be honest, NXT wasn't what it is now when he was there.
So you have to kind of start from the NXT during the era where Kenta and Finn Balor and Kevin Owens, Zayn, when they all got signed, that was when NXT kicked off into this next level.
Absolutely, and I think too, a guy like even Kevin Owens, he's had a successful main roster run, but what really memorable has he done? I mean, I know because I've watched the whole thing, and outside of his debut match with John Cena, there hasn't been anything that you can really pinpoint and say, oh yeah, that's Owens' defining moment. Like when you think of Randy Orton, you can think of a bunch of defining moments that really shaped his career. The legend killer gimmick the first time around, and all the things he did with like Mick Foley, and then the stuff where he was like the psychotic heel, he was punting all the McMahons in the head in 2009, and then his authority run in 24. I'm picking 3 things out of Randy Orton's career, out of the many things that he's done.
Yeah.
I mean, you can sit here all night and, like you said, sing Orton's praises. But that's where you need to say, okay, Kevin Owens, he had a great debut. All right,
he had his one and done world title reign, and the title reign was handed to him in storyline, and so it's not like you can't even really count that as a crowning moment because I don't see it as that.
And he lost, and the guy he lost it to was Bill Goldberg, who I am not a fan of. If you've listened to these episodes, Angelo, I'm not a fan of Bill Goldberg.
I could very well attest to that.
So actually,
absolutely despise.
So Angelo, to go to you, we talk about Gargano and McIntyre and other guys. If you had to pick one guy on any of the 3 brands, and this is a little bit of a harder question to kind of answer,
right.
Who's not really been the face of anything, like he's never been a world champion, he's never really been a big name in that respect, who's one guy that you can see getting to that level and being the next guy? I mean, we talked about the obvious candidates, but is there anyone that's we're sleeping on, or everyone's sleeping on maybe?
So someone who hasn't held any of the main, NXT, Universal, or WWE championships. Man, it's kind of tough. I don't know how this is gonna go over, but I'm just saying it because I've seen his work pre WWE a little bit. I'm gonna probably say maybe if he gets to work with the right people and he gets the right advice from everybody, I'm going to say maybe Dijakovic might be that guy. Just based on his athleticism and seeing all of his stuff.
I've loved his stuff with Keith Lee. I knew of him before his NXT days, but watching him with Keith Lee was...
Oh, yeah, that feud was...
we all know Keith, and Keith Lee. I am so high on Keith Lee. For a guy his size, and I know, and there's a lot that can be said about this new music and this new attire, and we can go on about that again forever. I just think that if they just let him be him, do him, give him good, solid storylines, no 50-50 booking, I think he can genuinely be a star and be that guy. I mean, if I had to pick one guy, not Gargano, not Ciampa, not Cole, not Balor, all these guys who you can say maybe, maybe, maybe. I think Keith Lee is the real deal. He's got that natural charisma that a guy, of the caliber of a John Cena or a Steve Austin has, and that's natural in the sense that he doesn't have to create it. He just comes out there and he has this feeling of I am going to capture the attention of the room no matter what I say or what I do while I'm here. And I remember when he came out at the Royal Rumble and he faced off with Brock Lesnar. I remember popping myself while I was watching right here in my room, but I remember the crowd outside of Edge, because I mean, listen, Edge coming back was going to be the moment of the night no matter what,
Oh, yeah.
and McIntyre winning, those two. But right up there with those two pops was Keith Lee's music hitting and realizing, oh shoot, he's about to go head to head with Brock Lesnar.
And that's a match we all want to see play out down the line.
I would love to see that match down the line. And it's because when Brock, again, it's like with Randy, when Brock wants to work, he's going to work. He made Drew look like a champ earlier this year, taking those claymores all the time. That one night on Raw in Brooklyn, right before the pandemic era started, he was out there selling those claymores like they were punt kicks.
And what you might not have noticed, actually, is there was this one little moment on the stage where Brock actually tells Drew to lift the title up on the stage.
Wow.
And, it just shows that Brock really knows. People give him so much shit for, oh, Brock doesn't care about the business. He's in it for himself. He's sitting on the couch in Minnesota. Don't give me that. Don't give me that he doesn't care about the business, that he's only there for the money. That's not true, because he plays this person that you want him to lose so bad. I don't want anyone else to lose worse than Brock Lesnar. Walking into WrestleMania 34 and we're ready to see Roman Reigns finally end the reign of Brock Lesnar, and he doesn't do it. And Brock is so good at that. Mm-hmm. And he's good at putting people over too. I mean, he lost to Seth Rollins twice in 2019 at the two big pay-per-views.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, he definitely cares in that respect as well. But people telling me that he doesn't care, that's not necessarily true. No. I just think that's people airing out their personal grievances with how he likes to work or whatever.
Yeah. I harken back to his 2015 series of matches with The Undertaker. And listen, Taker was 50 years old and probably should not have been in there taking the bumps he was taking with Brock Lesnar. I'm going to be honest with that. Because Taker, he's at his point where he needs to stop. And I'm kind of glad that if he actually has retired, I'm okay with it because of the situation. But besides that, I was there the night he faced Brock at SummerSlam. It was the only time I've been lucky enough to watch The Undertaker wrestle in my life. And live in person. And I remember watching those two guys. I mean, they worked well together every time they ever had a match, but damn, those guys put on a show for you that night. They really made you think that one of these guys was going to be carted out of there on a stretcher. Whether it was Brock from throwing Taker around like he was a toy, or Taker from saying, I'm just going to keep hitting you until you go down, or choke you out till you pass out. I genuinely was invested. And then their Hell in a Cell match, arguably, and this is to be, debated, I think was the best match those two had together. And they've had some great matches together. They had their 02 Hell in a Cell match. Mania 30 may have fallen a little flat because Taker got concussed. But I think that was their best match together. Both story-wise,
I agree.
And the playing out of the circumstances. They made, and then I think you even saw that little bit of respect between the two. Even though I don't know if it was intended, as the match ended, because I mean Brock was like, man, this old man's got something left. Even if I just beat it out of him, he had something to give, and I love that kind of stuff. And Brock is the best at pulling that out of people, the absolute best at pulling that out of people.
Yeah. So getting back to our original discussion about what's going to make a star, I have an interesting question for you. Oh. And so for the past year, they've been really pushing hard on The Fiend. Right? the Fiend is their top. He's in all the advertising, at least a little bit in some capacity. He may be a little too scary for some of the demographics. I'll give you that. But do you believe that the Fiend will one day have the same star power that the Undertaker, who is one of those Mount Rushmore names, do you think down the line he may ever be able to get to that same level?
Man. And Angelo, you got something for that? I got to think, man. This is tough.
It definitely is a tough one.
I'm coming in with a hard hitting question.
I love it. Bring it on, man. I love this.
No, this is exactly what I like about this, is that we can easily talk about it. Will he have the same star power as Taker and possibly be on the Mount Rushmore? I think maybe, however long he has left in the tank as time goes on, I think he could probably make it up there like Taker. He could probably wrestle until he's 60, no problem. I don't know about 60, but Taker's pushing his age, and he's still going like he did back in 10, 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I think possibly if the Fiend does all the right stuff that he needs to do, he could possibly be that.
Yeah. Okay, so for me, it's a little bit like I hate to be I hate to be critical of the story direction when it comes to somebody that I love, because I genuinely love this gimmick from the second I first saw it. And right off the bat, not even a month in, Angelo, Austin, you were at Money in the Bank too. The crowd was chanting Yowie Wowie, and this gimmick was a month old. At one point during the Money in the Bank match. So it's like, to be able to have that get over so quickly is a sign that people enjoy it. The Undertaker gimmick got over very quickly because it was so different at the time for all the hokey gimmicks that were happening in the early 90s, that it got over and it clicked because people were like, this is different and the guy can go. But that being said, in the course of a year, you book yourself into a corner with Seth and the Fiend, because you don't want Seth to lose, but you don't want the Fiend to lose. So what do? You have a DQ and a Hell in a Cell match where there's no disqualifications. And then you have him win the title because you realize you messed up with that one, and he ends up losing it to a man who is 55 years old and should not be wrestling in Bill Goldberg. And then you have him go an entire summer trying to get the title back to then lose it after holding it for 7 days. To him, and all right, I'm going to give Roman the credit. Roman's new gimmick is really exciting. So I'm going to give that one a smaller pass than the Fiend losing to Goldberg. But the story direction is very simple to me. You got to let this man be untouchable. And he has to be untouchable for as long as you can. And that's the only way he'll ever match The Undertaker. Because and that's to say, like, and I don't want to compare, because that's another thing we're going to talk about before this is over. But
right.
If you're trying to build a similar star to that same caliber with a creepy gimmick, you need to book him the right way. Otherwise, no one's going to believe in him after a while. That's what happened with the original incarnation of Bray Wyatt. He kept losing the big match. And you know what? After the second or third time, it's like, well, damn, he's going to cut an interesting but pretty weird promo, have a good match, and then take the loss at the end of the day because the other guy's got to go over and look strong. So
yeah, he wasn't. I don't even think he ever really won the big match as his first incarnation until Elimination Chamber 2017.
And I don't think
he never really did. And so if all he was doing was going out there and cutting eerie promos and then losing, he's at that point was, let's be honest, no better than Goldust, who could go out there and say some weird shit and then lose the match and then. But I will say that, and we'll get into that comparison thing in a minute because I'm actually itching to talk about that. But your championships aren't everything with the business, but booking is.
Yeah.
And the way that they've booked him to lose said championships twice in these manners is just. Now they're just throwing him into a time filler storyline with Alexa Bliss, which could be exciting, but it's such a weird direction to just veer off in out of nowhere.
Honestly, yeah.
So I don't know if it's even recoverable. Will the character always be interesting? Yes, because there's no one else doing it. There's no one else who's going out and playing Steve from Blue's Clues on our TV in this wrestling world like this. But it's...
I like that one.
I love that.
I think they blew it.
Yeah. I hate to say it, too, because they had so much potential. And even after the stuff with Goldberg, I did think it was recoverable because one loss doesn't break a person. I mean, people like to think it does, but one loss doesn't break a person. If the gimmick is still over, because he turned around and had one of the best matches, well, match being the loose word, at WrestleMania in the Firefly Funhouse match with John Cena. And
people were still talking about that in the Boneyard match, and those weren't really even matches.
Yeah, those were cinematic, dare I say, masterpieces, because they put together something that was so unique and different that we haven't seen before. It wasn't like a ripoff of the ultimate deletion, the final deletion, the all those deletion things that Matt Hardy did in the compound. I lost track at this point. And it was, and it really to me was the salvation for Bray Wyatt. I was like, oh, you know what? He still beat Cena. He may have lost the title, but he beat Cena. He doesn't need the title, like you said. The title doesn't make a major superstar. Look at some of the biggest names in the business. Roddy Piper was never world champion, but he is held in the highest regard because of what he did in the business. He may not be Mount Rushmore caliber, but he is definitely in the discussion for one of the all-time greatest, especially if you're talking heels. So,
and he's another name that people outside of the wrestling world, they know. They know Roddy Piper.
Absolutely. And to be able to say, hey, I was never world champion. I was never the guy here. I was only one of the guys. And I'm still one of the most well-known. That's something that can be, you can talk about it here 30 years later. We have a timer notification coming from Zoom as we're using Zoom tonight, everybody. We got 10 minutes left, so we will move this along because this is a free Zoom account. But nonetheless, we will move right along into our discussion about this comparison thing. So I'm going to read this to you guys. This made the rounds on social media a couple of weeks ago, and the three of us have all seen it a couple of times, and we're going to discuss this. Someone was saying that you have modern-day versions of some Attitude Era legends, and he's comparing modern wrestlers to them. So I'm going to read this list, and then I'm going to let you two just go to town on what you think about it. He compares MJF to The Rock, Jon Moxley to Stone Cold Steve Austin, Chris Jericho to Hulk Hogan. Jericho kind of fits both eras, to be honest. Orange Cassidy to Triple H, Kenny Omega to Bret Hart and Ric Flair, Hangman Adam Page to John Cena and Shawn Michaels, Darby Allin to The Undertaker, Rey Fenix to Rey Mysterio, the Young Bucks to the Hardy Boys. Go ahead. What do you have to say about that? Austin, you want to go first?
No, Angelo, go first. I've been talking a lot.
Okay, Angelo, go ahead.
All right, so really quick, with the whole MJF to The Rock thing, I honestly do not see it. But if you're going to compare him to someone that, from like a different era, me and my brother were talking about it, and he said that he could see MJF as Randy Orton when he first debuted. So that, if that was the case, I would definitely 100% agree with that one. But MJF as The Rock, no way in hell. Mox as Austin, I definitely see.
That's the only one I credit. If I'm going to credit any of these, that's the only one I'm giving it to. Because it's the only logistical one. Sorry.
No, two of them that I credit are that and Rey Fenix to Rey Mysterio.
Yeah.
Those are the only two that I credit. The other ones I don't see. The Young Bucks as the Hardys, that one's kind of tricky for me.
All they had was similar attires for that one. I mean, and that was only for a brief period of time for the Hardy Boys' career.
The very early days. Early days. Not even when they were popular. Once they got popular, they were wearing all black, and Jeff had his hair painted.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man.
No, so it's like...
Austin.
I definitely think that a list like this, and then other ones that have been circling around for years and years and years, we've been talking about, Dolph Ziggler is just this reincarnation of Shawn Michaels, and this guy is just like this guy from the past. He's version 2.0. All of these comparisons are exactly why we will never, well, not never, but we were not likely to ever get a star like John Cena, Stone Cold, because we're always comparing them to the stars of the past. We're never going to be better than the past, or we're never going to make a new platform or a new era of guys when all they are is just bootlegs and copycats. And even if they're doing the completely different things, if people are still comparing them, they're never going to break away from the comparison.
Oh yeah, no, and to like I think it's just that they're trying to recreate the past when you need to be building a bigger and better future, and to live in that past is dangerous because you're trying to live in an era where that doesn't exist anymore. I'm sorry, it just doesn't exist anymore, and nothing wrong with it not existing anymore, but we need to live in a new era. And not because they've used that term so many times, but you need to create new stars, and the only way you create new stars is through not comparing them to the past. And to compare Darby Allin to The Undertaker, I know we're on a time crunch here, so I don't want to go too deep into these gripes that
disrespectful, The Undertaker, at that point.
You're talking on the most basic level, an undead mortician to an emo skater boy. That's what you're telling me is the same thing? Absolutely freaking not. I'm sorry, but there's no way. The Undertaker is by far, in my opinion, the single greatest professional wrestler in the history of the business. I spoke about it in our very first episode. And I stand by that because of what he has done in 30 years at the top of the business. Darby Allin could become a star in the future, and that would be fantastic. I'd be so happy for him. I love him. But he is not the freaking Undertaker. And I will stand by that because he never will be the Undertaker. He never should have to be the Undertaker.
No one will ever be the Undertaker. And that's why making the Bray Wyatt comparison earlier that I made was horribly wrong of me to make, but I didn't make it in the sense that I was comparing Bray Wyatt's character to the Undertaker. I was just making it in the sense of the star power and the level of outreach to the community and the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah. At the end of the day, I just think if you're gonna do those comparisons, if you need to make them somewhat compatible. And the only one, like I said, that I can genuinely give credit to is Austin to Moxley. Because Moxley has taken that Austin-type gimmick and modernized it. And that's okay. But besides that one out of those, I can't give any of them credit. And that Darby Allin to The Undertaker one sits so poorly with me. It infuriates me in more ways than I can count. All right. Yeah, so we got about 4 minutes left, so anybody want to add anything else to this discussion? We kind of covered everything that I had to bring up. Any other last-minute questions or comments on the topic?
I actually have one question for both of you really quick.
All right, bring it on.
How do you feel about the next generation professional wrestlers? And by that I mean like Brian Pillman Jr., Davey Boy Smith Jr., taking their father's gimmicks and kind of trying to put their own twist on it. How do you feel about that?
I like it, but don't make it the same thing. I'm going to stand by that. Dominic Mysterio has been different than his father so far, and I want it to stay that way, but I don't know if it will, and I'm afraid that it won't. And I think that at the end of the day, that's what's needed. More than anything, you need to avoid letting that become the reality. You cannot be your father come again. Not Dominic, not Davey, not Brian, none of them. They need to be different, and that's the only way that they'll ever make it in the business, in my opinion. Austin, what do you got?
No, I completely agree. I mean, you'll always live in their shadow if you're never willing to step out of it and be yourself, I think a huge detriment example is Curtis Axel. And we've circled all the way back to Curtis Axel, but let's talk about how his gimmick was, again, just I'm Mr. Perfect Son. Look at me, I'm Mr. Perfect Son.
No pun intended, perfect example.
He's a good wrestler. He can do, was he ever going to be world champion? No, neither was his father, I don't think. But I living in your father's shadow is not the way that you're ever going to get to the top, and that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, like I said, with Dominic, they're doing it right. They're doing well so far. Knock on all the wood that you can find that they don't ruin it, because I'm excited for Dominic's future, but we'll see what happens.
Well, Dominic's an interesting case. They're giving him different theme music. It's not just a Charlotte Flair Like, it's the same song, but it's a different song kind of thing. It's a different theme song. He's got different attire. He's got, I think, different logos and stuff. I'm not really sure. He's not wearing a mask. It's brilliant because he's not a photocopy of his father. And, I could talk about this for a while, but
Yeah, we're under.
that's just my point.
Yeah, we're under a minute now, so we're gonna have to wrap it up. But Austin, we thank you for joining us, man. It's been a pleasure to have you. We hope you have you back sometime soon.
Always ask. I'll be waiting for the call.
All right, Angelo. Thank you as well as always, and we'll be back hopefully in another week with another episode. And we shall see you all very soon. And always remember to never be afraid to be a fan. See you later, everybody.